Alright, today I'm going to show you how to make a hex map in Tableau. In case you don't know what a hex map looks like, this is what it looks like. Essentially, it's a simplified way of representing a real map. It's an approximation and is quite popular for representing US geography in Tableau. This is one example of what a hex map looks like. Another would be this, there you go, you have the states. Another would be this, alright? So when would you want to use hex maps? What are the pros and cons? One pro is when actual location is not entirely relevant. So for example, if you look at Arizona and New Mexico, Arizona in reality is not northwest of New Mexico per se. So it's useful to use a hex map when you don't really care about the exact location. Two, it's good for when you want to compensate for Alaska and Hawaii. And so as you can imagine, or in case you don't know, but when you draw out a real map, and especially if there's data in Alaska and Hawaii that you need to show, what's going to happen is your visualization gets pulled out because Alaska is so far north and Hawaii is a bit not as far southwest. And so what ends up happening is you end up having like this visual where it's like really zoomed out, and it kind of takes away from the numbers that you may or may not have on the main body of the US. Or it might now require your users to kind of do some work to zoom in and zoom out, and it kind of takes away from sort of the impact of maybe some of whatever you want to see in the main body of the U.S. And it could include Alaska and Hawaii. So the other pros is so just to reiterate, because I kind of went on a ramble there, but it's useful for when you want to bring in Alaska and Hawaii. You have data points in there. That's the key thing. If there's no data points, then you can just filter it out. But if you have data in Alaska and Hawaii that you want to bring in along with the main island, it's useful for doing that because it doesn't. It has everything you need is right in front of you, and you don't need to do extra work. A third reason why doing a hex map might be useful is that ultimately it's simple, and that's sort of the underlying goal of visualizations, that you want to sort of communicate data, but do it in a way that is simple for most people to understand, and it gets the point across real quick. So it's simple. Okay. And then lastly, one pro of using hex map, or one reason why you could use a hex map, is when size does not matter, or when size sort of kind of overshadows what you want to tell. And so what I mean by that is, Alaska by geography size is a huge piece of land. Same with Texas. It's in certain situations where maybe Texas only represents like maybe 1% of the data, and same with Alaska, and yet the size of them kind of distracts from the rest of the visualization based on whatever criteria you used. So a hex map is a nice way around that. It equalizes everything so that everyone sort of gets a fair chance of being looked at. So that would be a fourth reason why you may want to use a hex map. And so what are reasons why you would not want to use a hex map? Well, it's almost like the opposite side of all the pros. One is hex map, the locations tend not to be accurate, because you're trying to fit it within this aesthetic of like all these tiles are nicely next to each other, and so as a result you need a compromised location for it. So just realize that by using a hex map you are sacrificing location accuracy. So if location obviously is important to you, then you would not use a hex map. Another reason is when size is important. Very simple there. Hex map, they're all uniform size. So if it is important to know how big a certain effect is, you would not use a hex map. And then lastly, one reason, and this is I guess just really relative or subjective I guess, is that a hex map might not be familiar. For example, if you look at this country, this country here, or this region here, if you will, if you were to see this hex map, and if you just saw these abbreviations, you may or may not know right off the bat what it is. Even with the American ones, like this one's a little bit closer to the US states, and I think once you start seeing the state abbreviations, you can quickly pick up what it is. But some of them might not be as apparent. Like this one, for example, I think may throw people off. For example, this was the same issue with the other one, but like Washington isn't right above Idaho per se. Washington is directly above Oregon and California, And so that would be one con of using hex map, that if your dimensions aren't correct and if your sizing isn't correct, people might not recognize it, and that might take away from your message because they may be wasting time just trying to figure out, okay, what am I even looking at? Or they might not even be interested at that point. So, you know, so I'm not wasting too much time just explaining the pros and cons of hex map. Let's just move on. But just realize that, as with all visualizations, there's a time and place for when you want to use certain visualizations. Okay. All right, Tableau. Now I need to take a step back. So to make a hex map, you need 3 key elements in Tableau, 2 of which are not native to Tableau. Those 2 elements are a shape file and a hex map file. A shape file is pretty standard. It's essentially dictating to Tableau what shape do you want these tiles to take. Okay, so let me take a step back there. Technically, Tableau does have shapes that are native to the program, like a triangle and a square and so on and so forth. But for shapes that aren't native to Tableau, then you're going to have to download it somewhere. You can create it yourself in Paint or whatever, or you can download it online. I can assure you that it is super easy to find a hexagon shape online. The second one, which is a little bit more unique, is a hex map file or a spatial file. And essentially what a hex map or a spatial file is just locations of where to put each tile. Okay, so on the surface you see this really cool tile pattern, but underneath it all are frames, wireframes, that sort of tell Tableau where it is. And it's just, all it is an XY axis and just points. Okay, and I'll show you that later on in Tableau what I mean by that. So all the hex map file is a series of X and Y coordinates. In this case, they named it row and column because they knew that other people were going to use it, so they really simplified it for you to tell you exactly where to put it in the visual. But all it is XY coordinates and the state, and then maybe even an additional column to help link it together. But these 2 really are the key. Well, these 2 plus some kind of identifier. Okay. As for these numbers, they're not, like, there is no source of truth. Like, this was just some arbitrary number that somebody set, and then from there create the rest of the map. And so what I mean by that is, if you go back to here and imagine an XY axis, X being here and Y being here, somebody just randomly picked one, let's just say here, and said, okay, this is, X is 1, Y is 4, and create that, and then arbitrarily said, okay, well, if this is 1 and 4, then Idaho is probably 1.5 and 3 and so on and so forth. Okay, and that's all a hex map is. Like, it's just a series of X and Y values that somebody dictated and created the rest of the map out of. You can change these values however you see fit. You can do whatever you want to them. It's all relative. Okay, so like I was saying before, you need 3 key elements. The 2 is you need a shape file for whatever shape you want. In this case, it's a hexagon. You need a location file, which in this case is this hex map, which with the X and Y series. And then lastly, of course, you need a data file specifically with state information, state-related information. Okay. So going back to Tableau, what are we going to do? We're going to use the Superstore data set. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect to the hex map file. Okay. Okay. We see here it's all kosher, and then we're going to join it with our data file. Show Tableau global superstore. The global superstore is a very standard file, but really you can use any file with a state, with data that has some state relationship. Okay. It automatically did it for us. I think so it depends on what version of Tableau you have. It'll automatically create a relationship, but you might have to drag it. But essentially you're going to have to do a join or a relationship function. In the newest version of Tableau 2020, it will automatically identify the relationship. In this case, it's going to be the states. All right. But if you have an older version of Tableau, you may need to do a join. And depending on what you load first, the hex map or your data file, you're going to have to be careful what type of join you use. Without wasting time in all the different kind of joins, just keep that in mind, that depending on what order you load the map, and if you load the data files, and if you have an older version of Tableau, you may need to join it a very certain way. But in the newest version of Tableau Public, all you need to do is dictate the relationship, which is irrelevant of the join, and in some cases might even do it automatically. Okay, so I joined the text map to the global store data, and so now they're connected by states, and all that's left is to build it. Okay, so first let me illustrate kind of some of the problems with the map. So first and foremost, I need to do something. So the global superstore data set that's default with Tableau, it contains information from all countries. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to just restrict it to the United States here. Okay. And I'm going to populate the states. Okay. And so it's nice and compact. It just so happens that we have no, we have no, there we go. We have no data for Alaska, but case in point, if we did have data in Alaska, it would have populated up here, and this would have been our view. And it would have taken away from, the bulk of what we wanted perhaps show, which is what's happening here. Or it may not, depends on what you're trying to visualize, but that's one of the challenges that would have happened with doing the visual this way. Okay, and so this is what it would look like. If we had stuff, it'd be all the way out there, but we don't want this. We want hex map, right? So let's clear this. So I'm going to hide this. This is my data files. This is really the stuff that came from the hex sheet. Okay, so what do? Once again, as a reminder, all these are XY coordinates, and so we're going to load them as such. Okay, so they labeled it as such to make it easier for future users. So column goes to column, row goes to row, and we'll have this nice circle chart. Okay, the reason why we only have one is because it's an aggregate, so we need to split it up into its own individual little bits. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to just add state to the details so that it spreads it out. There you go. We're going to reverse it because these values are flipped. All right. In the case of my file, they're flipped. Depending on what file you download, it may not be, so just keep that in mind. I just know that this file created by Matt Chambers is flipped, and so it is customary to just flip the y-axis. Okay. So you may not need to flip it, but I do. Okay, so here we go, we flipped it. And if we size it correctly, let me just get rid of some of the fat here. Oops, no grid lines. Oops, no grid lines. And I don't really want 0 lines. I don't want any lines. Okay, and so if we look at here, it's beginning to look a little bit closer to what we want, which is the US state. Right here is Florida, correct. Probably California, no, Oregon, this is California, then Hawaii, Alaska, okay? So like I was saying before, this is the final product, but underneath it all, what Tableau is doing is just simply charting this out on an XY axis. That's as simple as it gets, and we're just replacing the points with hexagons, okay? So this is kind of the wiring between underneath it all, what we're doing, okay? So now that we have it all out on Tableau, the next is just import in our shapes. So we change the mark to shapes, and we just change the shape. So go here, more shapes, and select the shape. In my case, if you have a brand new fresh version of Tableau, or if you don't really go mess with shapes, you're gonna have to create a folder, okay? In my case, and in everyone's case, what you're gonna have to do is create a folder to put the shape in so that Tableau can reference it, all right? How do you do this? Well, all right, so first off, you have your shape file, okay? Now you need to drop the shapefile into Tableau's local repository so that it can look for it. Usually Tableau downloads its local repository in your documents. So you go to Documents, My Tableau, and it'll be under Shapes. Okay. And these are all the standards as you can see here. Let's see if these are all the standards as what you'll see there. And so all you got to do is create a folder. It doesn't have to be any special name, whatever you want, and Tableau will reflect it. In this case, I created a custom folder, and I dropped the shapefile in there. And then either I restart my Tableau or I reload the shape. Reload the shape is just telling Tableau to hey, look back in your directory and see if there's any new folders, and it should pick up your new folder, which is custom or whatever you name it. Okay. So I created a folder in the repository, I added the shape in, and now I can select it. Okay. So I do it, and as you see, it's done. It's not so clear here that they're hexagons, so we'll just resize it. All right. Let's resize it to what we visually want it to look like. That's good enough for us. All right, and then now we add in the details. All right. One quick note is, if you guys just noticed me doing it, you have to manually resize it, which is nice because it gives you that freedom to kind of make it look however pretty you want. The drawback with that is if you create a dashboard visualization that has automatic resizing, it may mess up your visualization. So what I mean by that is, this is a fixed canvas, and so only in this dimension will this look like this. If it automatically resizes to something like this, it'll look like this, and it's going to look terrible. So keep that in mind that, if you have a automatic dashboard, this visualization may or may not work without some tweaks. And I'll talk about the tweaks at the end of the video of how you can get around your hex map not going wonky. The easiest way is just create a dashboard with a fixed dimensions, but there's I might as well say it now. It's not like that at all. But essentially, you just create a dashboard with fixed dimensions, or you use more modern hex map files which have those values that tells Tableau, hey, for sure this has to always be this value between the tiles. Okay. So okay, so we got the shapes, and now we want to pretty it up, and that's pretty boilerplate. So in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to add. I'm going to chart out the hex map based on profit, so I'm going to add that value to the color, and based on color, it should fade it appropriately. Okay. I also want to add in the typical elements of hex map, which is the state abbreviation. There we go. Right. So see, we can only some of it. To fix that, to fix it showing everything, we just go into the label. We tell it to center. Or wrong one. Sorry, I scratched my nose. Center. That's good, but we want the other ones right. So we're going to tell Tableau, just let them overlap each other. We don't care. So there we go. And then because we're doing, well, not because, but in an effort to sort of better illustrate what we're trying to do, not only do we have the map scaled to our measure, which is profit, but it'd be nice to also put profit on there for people to see. So we'll do that as well. Label. Okay. Profit, of course, is well, not of course, but in this case it is. Well, no, profit should always be in financial terms, but we're going to change it. Format, no. Do we do here? There we go, format. We're going to change it to currency. We're going to do 0 sig values because nobody cares if it's 1833.22 or something like that. And so that's really the elements of how to create a hex map. But we need to do some troubleshooting because, and this might be useful for you in your hex map, because if something appears weird, it's always valuable to check why. Okay, so I kind of went on like sort of a free thought here. Okay, so essentially the hex map is done, right? You have all your basic elements. You have the abbreviation, and then you have the value in there, okay? What I'm going to do now is troubleshoot my hex map because, visually this doesn't look good. If you look at the color scale, it's supposed to fade from red to blue, but it's all essentially the same color, this uniform gray. It really doesn't take advantage of the color fading that I chose. And so I need to look into why. And usually when you see a lot of things in the same color area, essentially what that means is you have some extreme in there that's pulling your color values way off chart so that none of these guys can take advantage of it. Okay, so one way to do that is I can go to edit colors. All right, I go to advanced and check out what the values are. So it goes from -25 to 1 million. Right away, just looking at all this, none of my values is 1 million. So I can tell right away that, okay, part of the reason why it doesn't work is because my values are way too skewed. Why is it skewed? Simply put, the data set that I'm using is global. So it's not, Tableau is not filtering on just the US, which I've done already. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to compensate for that. So all you have to do is really, however you want to do this, you can do it super mathematically, or you can just eyeball it. I think functionally you can just eyeball it, but all right, so let's just say, let's do country. We want to filter only United States, right? And we only want the states, of course. Add all members, okay. US states only, and then because we're doing profit, we'll add profit in. You can just eyeball it. Field sum, all right. Like the point of this is, I'm trying to fix my visualization. I try to want to get a range of what values would be appropriate. So I see that it tops out at 76 and it bottoms at -25. So maybe I'll top it out at like maybe, I'll have these be the extremes. If you, let's just say like 40,000, maybe 50,000 would be a good one. All right. And that's really all there is to it. You go here, you change it to something more realistic, 50,000, you apply it, and voila, there you go. Now you have the color that you were expecting, and that's how you troubleshoot it. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're building your hex map. If you see something wonky, of course, you can continue adjusting if you don't like it. Like if it's all gray here, maybe I'll just change it to, I don't know, 20,000. Let's see if that does anything. No, these are just too low, probably. Oh, these are no color because they don't have any value. That's why. But yeah, so that's one way to troubleshoot your thing. One other thing that might be kind of cute is you can kind of do size effects with Tableau. What I mean by that is, by nature, a hex map is uniform in size, but you can add small modifications so that certain things pop out more than others. Why would you want to do that? Well, obviously to highlight certain occurrences. So what I mean by that is, you have the color gradient already emphasizing that Texas is doing really poorly, and then conversely, California, Washington, and New York is doing really well. But maybe, in addition to that, maybe you want to give it a little size boost. Or maybe in this case, like maybe the visualization colors are a little bit too close, and the system limitations prevent it from really distinguishing those numbers anymore. One thing you can do is the size. You can change the size. And so the way to do that is you take the value that you're measuring. In this case, it is the sum of the profit. Hold on, I'm going to fix this. Why is this still a number? Oh, gosh. It's because it's a currency. Duh. Okay. So fixed currency. Okay, so if you want to make it a size thing, all you got to do is take the thing that you're measuring. In this case, it's sum profit, and apply it to the size level. So then the size is going to come up now, and so now your hex map not only is color graded based on the value, but it's also sized based on the value. And all you gotta do is just fix it. So right now it's working as it's supposed to be. The lowest values are tiny, Texas, -25, and the large ones are the largest, New York, California, so forth. If you want something less drastic, a little bit more subtle, super simple. Change the end value range for 1. So we'll do 50,000. And once again, these numbers are not set. This is kind of where the art is. You just play around with whatever you think is right. We'll change this to range so that we can modify it, and then we just start changing. Okay, applying. That's too big, so then you go back. I'm doing this to sort of illustrate kind of the process. You don't need to necessarily know the numbers, but it does help. But you can totally get by without knowing the numbers. And so there you go. I set something that's pretty appropriate, but essentially it caps out at 50. And the upper end sort of dictates the overall size. So you would move the top one to sort of make sure that they all kind of fit nicely. If I made it too big, it'd just smush with each other, as so. All right. So first find out like kind of the range of what you want your biggest piece to be. In this case, like that. And then the next part is just find out where your smaller range is. So if you squish it, if you bring it closer, it'll squish. All right. But if you bring it out, it'll grow smaller. All right. So play around with that. And so by doing this, you can create the effect of everything looks mostly uniform except for the major pieces. And so it's just up to you to find kind of that balance. I think I kind of butchered it right now. That's going to be good enough. That's fine. For the sake of illustration, that's fine. But as you can see here, one last remark is that, if the point of a hex map is to show uniform tiles, really the size effect is good only when there's like 1 or 2 things that you really want to illustrate. When you have so many different things that are kind of like different from the rest, it starts to take away from the hex map and the point of it. So I might not use the sizing effect for this one because you have New York, Washington, California that all are really big, and small Texas. So I probably wouldn't do it, but it's whatever you feel is appropriate. So, and that is essentially it. That is how you create a hex map. And yeah, hope you learned something. Thanks.